Teach for America. Good morning.
Good morning.
There you go. I'm Joel Klein, and unlike many of you, I didn't have the privilege to go through Teach for America. So for me, this weekend is like being a stranger in paradise. I thank you for being here. I thank you for how much I've learned from all of you, and I thank you for your commitment to the future of a better America. What I want to do today is tee up this panel and get discussion going, because I hope what this weekend is not just one of connection, but one of rethinking, recommitting, and leaving Washington, making sure that something that has to happen in our country gets accelerated, and that is that one day, every child, regardless of race, regardless of family background, regardless of national origin, gets an excellent education in America. It's indispensable to our future. The questions the speakers have been asked to respond to today is, what are your current thoughts about the state of public education in the U.S., and what will it take to reach one day? We have 6 amazing people who are going to talk about those 2 issues. I will start. I'm not one of the amazing. There are 6 after me, but I will start. Then we're going to hear from one of my personal heroes, Kevin Huffman, who's now a fellow at the New American Foundation and a former commissioner in Tennessee, where he did extraordinary work. Then from Kaya Orange Jones, the executive director, Teach for America in Louisiana, and New Orleans elected board member. And in New Orleans, some really great stuff going on. Then we're going to hear from Abigail Smith, the former deputy mayor for education in D.C., from Anna Ponce, the chief executive officer, Camino Nueve charter academic. Then from Jonathan Klein, co-founder and chief executive officer of Go Public Schools. Then finally by Julie Jackson, chief schools officer and K-8 for Uncommon Schools, Uncommon Schools. So that's the 6 people that we'll hear from. After that, the panelists will all come back up to the stage and we'll take your questions. So let me start, because I think this is a very interesting time. In 25 years, Teach for America, in my view, has done more to change the landscape of public education than anything else, anywhere else, over any time. It has been a powerful juggernaut for change. And so it's really appropriate, as we think about our 25 years, to think about where we are and where we're going. Because I always think self-reflection in any movement is critical to that movement. So for me, here's where we are. We are a better nation and a better education system now than we were when we started 25 years ago. It's been an enormous amount of change, much of it positive, not all of it. And there's been a commitment and a focus on the importance of this issue. I believe there's no greater issue facing this country than educating every kid to the level that we need to do so. Because right now, the world has changed so profoundly and dramatically. And a kid who is undereducated, or worse, uneducated, is simply not going to be capable of competing, of playing, of participating in a 21st century global high-tech economy. So the mission we committed ourselves to starting 25 years ago is that much more critical and that much more important today than it was then. And yet, for 25 years of hard work and commitment by lots of people here and lots of people not here right now, we're still not remotely, emphasis, not remotely, where we need to be. There are far too many kids in America, growing up in poverty in particular, frequently children of color, who are not getting the education they need, and we know it. And if those were our children, and yes, they are our children, but if they were literally our children, we would be mad as hell about that. And it's time now to be mad as hell about other people's children who are not getting the education they need and deserve. Because in the end, those other people's children, they are indeed our children. The future of this nation depends on a very different world. And it appalls me, and that's a strong word, that we have a presidential election going on in America right now, and virtually no serious discussion about this, the premier issue for our nation. So when I look at where we are, I say to myself, a lot of road has been traveled, much more road to cover, but we need a re-energization, you say it. We need to re-energize ourselves. We need to think hard about where we are. And that's the second thing. The question of where we are in education is critical, but the question of where we are as an educational movement, with a variety of different views, and you'll hear those this morning, that to me is also a question. And as I said, self-scrutiny is an indispensable thing for any thoughtful movement. Self-doubt can be troubling. And I want to talk a little bit about that, because I think we are at something of an inflection point in where we are in the education reform movement. For the past 10, 15 years, two core concepts dominated that discussion. One was the notion of accountability, and the other was the notion of choice. In my view, they remain critical. By themselves, not complete, but I don't think they should be abandoned, and yet both notions are under severe attack. And again, we should think about them both. There are lots of things wrong with the way accountability has been done. Choice has been less than perfect. But both of those core concepts, I think, are a question that we need to really focus on what our commitment is to them, because I think they'll be critical for our future. Now, let me give you two levels of caveat. The first level of caveat is schools alone are not the answer. There's a whole lot of other social justice issues that need to be addressed in America. But we can never be led to this false dichotomy that because schools are not an incomplete solution, that they aren't an indispensable solution. Whatever else we do, we don't get education right, trust me, we will pay a massive price. Second point, to never doubt that poverty is a complicating factor in all of our discussions. But in fact, I see that through a different lens. The challenges that poverty presents in education make our commitment, our efforts, and our work all the more compelling, even if they are all the more difficult. Second level, choice and accountability are an incomplete prescription for school reform no matter what we do, and we should recognize that. But again, like education and getting it right, choice and accountability ultimately are indispensable to the success that we need for our children. And so while I think, for example, issues like curriculum, issues like teacher professionalism, issues like that we're facing in vocational changes and in the college and career thing, all of those issues and many, many others are critical. But to me, these two pillars are fundamental. In New York City, if you look at the work we did there over Mike Bloomberg's 12 years, the two great successes we had grew out of a simple apples-to-apples accountability system, which we use to rank our schools and shut down those that were failing, and replace failing schools with a huge number of new public high schools that worked. Been studied by everybody, MDRC, great results. And the second thing we did under Bloomberg is open up somewhere close to 200 new charter schools. Right now in New York City, about 100,000 kids and growing are going to charter schools. And remember, not a single one of them had to. Every one of them had a local school they could go to. Those kids, overwhelmingly children of color, are now getting a better education because we were willing to buck the establishment and take on the heat necessary for change. And that transitions me now into sort of the question, and I think you'll find this a weird answer, but I want to focus on it. And the question is, what will it take us to get to one day? And here, I think the answer lies in something that's going to make us a little uncomfortable. So I want to talk about it candidly. I think the answer to get us there requires a different, a deeper, and a much, much more robust understanding of politics and power and what we are dealing with in this transformation. I once spent some time in New Orleans at an education conference, and one of the people who spoke there was then Harvard historian, now Stanford historian, Neil Ferguson. And at the end of the conference, Ferguson came up to me, I'd known him some, and he said to me, he said, I don't get this world ed reform. I said, well, why not? He said, you got some of the smartest people in the world, but not one of them has read Machiavelli. And what he meant by that is we do not understand the forces of power, the commitment to the status quo, and the inevitable resistance that change will face. And so for me, the answer to the question of what it will take to get to one day was provided long ago by Frederick Douglass, who said, and I quote, "If there is no struggle, there is no progress. Those who profess to favor freedom and yet depreciate agitation are men who want crops without plowing up the ground. They want rain without thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the awful roar of its many waters." And so this core notion, embodied in Howard Fuller's recent biographical odyssey, "Without struggle, there is no progress," is to me the greatest impediment we face. And again, I want to be clear, that doesn't mean we don't look constantly and scrutinize what we do. But if we do not understand that status quos have enormously fierce defenders who will not give cheerfully to a different vision and a different world and the hard work it takes to get there, we will not succeed. Let's talk simply about TFA itself, which over the last several years has had to face many challenges, including many public attacks on what I think is the premier school reform movement this country has ever seen. Now, people have often asked, why is that? And of course, some challenge and some attack, I think, not only legitimate, but necessary. But on the other hand, I don't think we should be naive about the fact that there is a reason that people really want to tear down, and ultimately some people destroy Teach for America. And that reason is because no movement has thrown off more great leaders that have changed the landscape. And so in order to, you can clap for yourselves, go ahead. No, but this is a profound truth. No movement, the great pipeline, if we're going to have change, we're going to need a whole hell of a lot more people, like the Kaya Hendersons and the Michelle Reeves and the Dave Levins and the Kevin Huffmans and on and on and on. Where did all of those people come from? My former deputy, John White, Mark Sternberg. And I don't have enough time to list. There's so many great people at so many different levels. Where did those people come from? The people who created the great charter change, the people who brought real change to school districts throughout America and to states throughout. Those people almost always grew out of this movement. So if you don't want radical change in K-12, you don't want TFA. But if you want a world of one day, you want Teach for America. So to me, this weekend is a weekend when I want to ask each and every one of you to look inward, to ask yourself how prepared you are for the struggle, how ready you are for the incoming that's going to be inevitable as we move forward. And even as we do our own rethink, never lose the commitment we have to all of those kids whose lives will not be full if we don't get them the education they need. If there's anybody in this room who would randomly send your kid to a school in any urban school district in America, I'd like to meet you. I've never met one who said yes. And yet we send what I used to call in New York OPCs, other people's children, to those schools. And we pretend that that's okay. But in the end, that is fundamentally wrong. It is unfair. But most importantly, it is tearing apart the fabric of this nation. The question for your generation, more than any other, is whether the American dream becomes the American memory on our watch. The answer to that question depends on a vision of one day and a group of people undeterred, willing to fight like hell for those other people's children who have to become our children. Thank you for being here this morning. Thank you. Kevin, you coming up to the stage? All right, turn it over to Kevin Huffman. The work you did in Tennessee is what it's all about. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you. Like Joel, I'm going to try that again. Good morning. Good morning. So we were asked to reflect first on where we are and then to talk about where we're going to go. And I've actually had a lot of time to step back and think about this because I left my job a year ago and I've been doing writing and reflecting, which has actually been pretty interesting for me. One of the things that is pretty obvious when you look at where we are, there's lots of building evidence that we could build a better system than we have right now in this country. So we could build a better school system. We have hundreds of schools that didn't exist 25 years ago that are doing great things for kids, putting them on a different trajectory. We have whole systems and clusters of schools that are doing incredible work for kids. But if we're being honest and we step back and we say, where are we? I would say we're in exactly the same place as we were 25 years ago writ large. So let's see if I can get these slides up here. Where we are right now depends pretty much entirely on where you sit and more specifically on who your parents are. So I don't know if we'll get the slides, but I can talk to this anyway. If you back up a little bit out of education and you talk about this in economic terms, we've got a pretty significant problem in this country right now. There's been a lot of discussion about economic inequality over the last 5 years. And I think that discussion is important, but I've actually become more fixated on a slightly different question, which is the question of social mobility and why we have no social mobility in this country right now. And the reason why I'm more fixated on that particular question is because I think if we had income inequality and you felt like it was a meritocracy, you felt like it was driven by talent and hard work and merit, you might be able to understand it. But if you have no social mobility, then it starts to feel like we're living in a caste system in this country. And right now, if you're born poor in America, you stay poor. 4% of kids born into the bottom quintile of incomes make it to the top quintile of income. What kind of social mobility is that? And for this to be true, it's no shocker that the converse is true. If you're born well off, you don't become poor. And there's a very good chance that you are going to stay in the top quintile of incomes. So that's a very serious problem. And where education starts to enter into it is as the intervention that could make a difference there. Now, we know that it can make a difference in the form of schools that are doing great work. We know that it can make a difference in the form of districts that are sending more of their kids to college. But if you just look at the college data overall, you see that it's quite clear that even if you're born poor, if you get a college degree, your odds improve dramatically. So it's not a panacea, it's not a guarantee, but it is an odds changer for kids. The problem is, right now, getting a college degree itself tracks with whether you're born at the top or at the bottom. So it's a very theoretical intervention. It could change your trajectory, but if it tracks to income, it probably won't. And by the way, one of the things that I found, I don't know how many of you have seen this, but a lot of people, when you start talking about college, they will say to you things like, you know, not every kid needs to go to college. Well, 100% of the time that somebody has said that to me, it turns out they have a college degree. So we've become, over time, mired in a little bit of this sort of chicken and egg discussion between poverty and academic outcomes. It's not a very productive discussion, and I think I've come to believe over time, like probably most of you have come to believe, that schools don't cause poverty. Our schools are not the reason people are poor. But our systems of education play an institutionalized role in perpetuating a caste system in America. If you look at the results and understand that if you enter school as a 5-year-old and you're poor, that you exit the system 13 years later and you're still on track to be poor, and if you understand that that's true for rich kids as well, then we have a system, not universally, but that overall has become a way station in an economic caste system that hurts the country. That is incredibly unacceptable. And that's the evidence at scale, and of course we all know, as Joel said, schools aren't the only solution. If we're gonna solve this, we have to solve this from lots of different angles. But it's also true that we know, because of the hundreds of schools that do get different results for kids in poverty, and because of the districts and the clusters of schools, and we're starting to see states that are making some progress, we know that we could actually build a better system over time that impacts more kids. So how do we grapple with the reality that we have right now, the reality of a lack of social mobility, the reality that our intervention in education is not succeeding, while also recognizing the signs of hope and figuring out how to have more signs of hope and make a difference so that we're in a different place 25 years from now? So here are my few thoughts, and they come really from a sort of system perspective, from my time as a system leader in Tennessee. But some thoughts that I think might make a difference. So number one, we have to expand the menu of our aspirations for kids. And that expansion of the menu of aspirations for kids needs to come from the communities we serve and the communities that we're working in. I'll give you an example in DC here. One of the things that DC Public Schools is doing right now, they're teaching kids to ride bikes. All second graders learn how to ride a bike now. They're expanding fine arts programs. I think over time, we've become a little mired in a particular vision for what it means to serve our kids well. And expanding our menu of aspirations based on what the communities we serve want does not distract from academic outcomes, and in the long run, it almost certainly enhances them. Second, we've got to redouble our focus on results rather than policies. When I started more than 20 years ago in this work, and we didn't have a policy agenda because we were so small and so young, we weren't thinking, hey, you know what it means to be a reformer? It means that you believe in a certain set of policies. We said, things aren't working right now for our kids. We need to find things that work and do more of them. We need to find things that don't work and do fewer of them. One of the things that I saw in Tennessee around the sort of results policies thing, my first 2 years, the state test scores went up the most that they'd ever gone up in Tennessee. Still had a long way to go, but there was really good progress. And while we heard a lot of energy inside the state, outside the state, really not that many people reached out and asked how things were going. When we introduced a policy to change teacher licensure, lots and lots of people reached out and said, that's amazing, the work that you're doing is incredible. And by the work you're doing, they meant you introduced a policy, which, by the way, never even became law. We've got to redouble our focus on results, not on policies. Third, we've got to have a commitment to the truth when it comes to results. Right now, a lot of people on all sides of the political agenda spend a lot of time describing results in ways that stem from their starting place of what they want the results to be. We had some interesting folks who sort of, after we got really good results in NAEP, came back and said, here's our spin on why actually things aren't getting better in Tennessee. That's not helpful to our kids. Relatedly, we've got to give people space to learn. We have to give people space to look at what works and doesn't work and to step back and reflect on it. Not too long ago, I wrote something about something we had done in Tennessee that didn't work. And I took a pretty self-critical look at it. The response I got from a lot of people was, ha ha, if you were wrong about that, what else were you wrong about? That is not a helpful way to build a culture of continuous learning that is going to allow leaders to actually be reflective and get better results for kids. The last thing I'll say is we need to focus on perseverance. This work is hard, it's long, sometimes it's slow. When we set goals in Tennessee, we set goals that said we were going to improve proficiency rates by 3 to 5% a year. And a lot of people literally sort of ran around whispering, that's not very ambitious. Well, perseverance means improving things 3% and then coming back the next year and improving them 3% again and coming back the next year and improving them 3% again and not giving up. The work that's happening in some of our best improving places still has a long way to go. So when DC Public Schools are the fastest improving school system in the country, but they still rank on an absolute scale low, that doesn't mean that we're not succeeding. It means we have to persevere in the work. So I'm grateful to all the people here who are continuing to persevere in the work, and I'm excited to introduce my friend and one of my personal heroes, Kira Orange-Jones.
Thank you, Kevin. So first of all, I'll start by saying, as I was getting up at 5:30 this morning, my roommate was coming home. So thank you for being here this morning. So my perspective is certainly informed by proudly being the executive director of Teach for America Greater New Orleans for the past 9 years. And also having the great honor of representing New Orleans on the State Board of Elementary and Secondary Education now, beginning my second term. I think about this a lot, you know, and Joel spoke to it, I thought, quite well, but our education climate, the work around us has become quite vitriolic in the past several years. Divisive, highly politicized. I think about being a teacher in Louisiana 15 years ago, and certainly there were significant challenges as I thought about the best way to show up and be my best self for my students every day. And I think about the fact that teachers across this country, and certainly so many in this room, get up and have those same questions, and yet there is an environment around you that has gotten increasingly challenging, that you can't ignore and just close your doors. So when I think about what will be one element that's critical in getting us closer to one day, I believe it will ultimately be the ability of all of us as leaders, as educators, and possibly most acutely those of us who are of color being able to step into this as well, to be able to build our capacity to truly bridge more effectively. And by bridging, this is a word many of us have started to use. What I mean is recognizing that the false dichotomies that have become a critical part of our education discourse, the either you are a new teacher or you are effective. The either you are African American and from this community or you are ineffective. Either you are Teach for America, right? Or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? Those false dichotomies that I think for several years have certainly been a big focus of our national conversation will require a set of new skills from all of us to be able to fiercely interrogate what I'm saying and calling essentially a fierce interrogation and the ability to rigorously find the both and. And by both and, by no means do I mean, a watered down consensus or, slowing down progress by committee, but actually the recognition that there are multiple parts of our identities, there are many different ways that we are going to have to find the bridge between huge tensions in ideology and ideas, and be able to ultimately find the way to bridge into new solutions alongside our families and alongside our students if we are to achieve one day. And that's a skill that we can actually develop and capacity that we're gonna have to develop individually and collectively. So to illustrate my point, I thought I'd bring about 3 quick vignettes and an epilogue. They're all very personal to me, but I'm actually hoping that by the end, we'll have a better sense of what I actually mean by this idea of bridging and how it plays out in our work. And before I do, I'll say one more thing that I've noticed. So Joel spoke to this too, you know, this idea that this moment in time has become so vitriolic, that we all possibly feel it in different ways. I think about the teachers I have the ability to work with every day and the challenges they experience in the classroom, but also the systems leaders and school leaders across our city who are doing incredible work who also experience this. And it's not by accident that we're here, right? 25 years of change, fighting against very persistent status quo on multiple levels is crazy painful. It's not by accident that at times this work feels tremendously painful. So I want to start by telling you first about my run for office. So the first time I ran for office, I was, you know, a new candidate, had never entered into the political realm, and one important element during the campaign trail is actually stepping forward to do these policy forums. You know, it's an opportunity to connect with a group of voters and tell them how you feel on a variety of issues, whether it be teacher evaluation or assessments, curriculum, and state your positions. This particular forum was for a group of community activists and ministers in my community, and I had been prepping all day. I felt good. Right? My campaign manager walks in and she's like, okay, are you ready? I'm like, I'm ready. She's like, okay, give me your opening. How are you going to introduce yourself to these people who've never heard of you before? I say, okay. My name is Kira Orange Jones. I have spent my entire adult life here in Louisiana. I'm originally from New York City. I was born and raised by a single parent, a mother who made many sacrifices in her life so that I could have the kinds of opportunities that she was never able to actually be afforded herself. I'm really proud to have been a teacher and to be running for office now. So she looks at me and she says, and I'm like, that's it. Then I'm going to get into my first policy issue. She's like, you haven't said that you're the executive director of Teach for America. I'm like, well, I thought I would skip that part and move on to the first issue. And she looked at me and was like, what is wrong with you people? You cannot skip that part. You are the face of Teach for America in New Orleans. You're the executive director. And yet, in that moment, I realized that I was struggling to bridge various aspects of my identity in ways that made sense to me. So the fact that I could be a credible, viable member of this community, able to represent the perspectives and views of over 355,000 constituents, and be the executive director of Teach for America, and be an African-American woman and a Latina woman from a low-income community, did not seem as though those were things I could do together. She promptly told me, you will be including that, and so I did, and I stumbled through it, but it was actually a very painful experience. Now listen, I'm in this room, and I have such tremendous pride. I am so proud to be a member of this community and so proud to have had the chance for 10 years to run Teach for America Greater New Orleans. Teach for America has been my whole life, and even I feel that at times. My teachers feel that at times. And so the question is, how do we build that capacity to actually be able to live in all parts of ourselves which seem dichotomous to one another but are and not in fact? So my next 2 stories might seem disconnected, but I wanted to actually practice bridging together. I wanted you to know the kinds of experiences that I'm actually reflecting on every day, and how I'm trying to actually understand those experiences and connect them to one another so that I can both better understand the challenges impacting our children and our communities, and also understand the assets and the opportunities that might exist if I can live more completely into understanding how ideas might be able to be bridged together and experiences. So the night before the election day, my mother flew into town, and I went to a church that I had visited multiple times along the last 4 or 5 months. I'd gotten to know the parishioners very well. I'd been, 40, 50 churches throughout New Orleans over several months, but this church was a church that kept asking me to come back. I was not a member, but they were welcoming. They said, "We want to pray with you." I walked into the church. My mother and I stood in the front. The pastor, a woman, put her hands on me and asked the 200 to 300 parishioners to gather around us and put hands on me. They all just put hands on me. And for about an hour, they prayed for me. Now, I want you to understand this is not meant to be a religious story. And I've never considered myself to be religious, but this was a deeply spiritual experience. 300 people, parents, cousins, aunties, uncles, brothers, sisters of children who I am actually asking to represent one day, putting their hands on me and praying for me for an hour. There was something about that moment that felt so profoundly human and so affirming and enabled me to show up completely. So the next day, I won, right? And that leads me to my final story. Our first BESI meeting, our first state board meeting, we were evaluating a policy that would basically raise the standard, the set of expectations that we were holding our schools to, during their renewal process. Basically, the question was, should schools that were no longer failing have the opportunity to be renewed? And the policy on the table was, we were going to actually raise the standard from simply being no longer failing to one step higher. This was a very controversial policy. Many educators said, there's no way that, school leaders, especially those in New Orleans, will be for this. We're actually holding them to a higher standard. One by one, dozens of school leaders from New Orleans came forward, many of whom were alumni. And they basically, one by one, said, keep the standard raised higher. We will accept that challenge. The next person would come forward. We accept the challenge. Not only do we think the letter grade should be a C, we think over time it should be a B that you hold us accountable to. The next person would come forward. It got to the point where there were people on our board that turned to one another and said, I don't think these people understand the policy. And in that moment, I had such pride and conviction for these incredible school leaders who basically were going to be held to a higher standard, but were speaking with such authenticity and honesty about what they knew their students were capable of and what they were actually demanding of the state in turn to do so that they can actually deliver on the promises they actually had made to their families and communities. Those last two stories that I tell you may seem totally unrelated, and yet I believe both so many of the challenges facing our children and also so many of the assets and opportunities live between those stories. And what I'm trying to do as a leader, and what I think all of us are going to have to continue to learn to do, is figure out how to find those bridges so we can actually find new solutions versus sort of thinking that we have to get stuck. I want to close by saying that a couple of months ago, I made the decision to run again. And this time, I surrounded myself with other leaders who are also trying to figure out how to effectively live into all aspects of themselves and better bridge ideas and identities. And this time, I promised that every single day, I was going to practice bridging actively in my campaign, that I was going to be all of myself, show up completely. And it was risky, and it was frightening, and yet I still did it. And what was particularly important was not only did I leave at the end of that campaign cycle feeling way more effective and way more authentic, but I was also able to win with 70% of the vote, which was an absolute landslide. 80,000 New Orleanians went to a booth and voted for me, even though every day I stood there and said, I am from a low-income community. I am African American, I am Latina, I am a proud reformer, I am a proud Teach for America executive director, and I am trying to fiercely interrogate the both and versus the either or. So I welcome you to join me. Thank you.
Good morning, all. So, any 92 core members in the House? Yeah, like 6, right? Thank you, Kevin. How about North Carolina? Back in the day, it was just North Carolina. Now it's called Eastern North Carolina. Anybody? All right. Weldon. So what will it take to reach one day? It will take leaders at all levels of this work acting on the recognition that our fight for educational equity is at its core part of a broader and more fundamental effort to achieve racial justice, not as an outcome of educational equity, but as the path to educational equity and excellence. And I want to spend the next few minutes focusing on white folks' role in that work. What will it take to reach one day? It will take white folks digging deep and proactively and explicitly working to dismantle systems of racial oppression. So about 6 or 8 months ago, I was talking with my husband about how enraged and despondent I was feeling about the realities of racial injustice in this country. And like for a lot of people of all races, this issue has been really heavy on my mind. We have all been bombarded these last couple of years by horrifying, high-profile incidents of racial injustice. Too many to list: Trayvon Martin, Sandra Bland, Tamir Rice, Ferguson, Chicago, Flint. But for white people whose daily lives generally allow us to choose to ignore racism if we so wish, these high-profile incidents have forced a level of sustained acknowledgement that I don't think I have seen in my lifetime. So after this impassioned rant to my husband about the realities of what it means to be Black in America today, I said to him, I feel this so strongly, and yet I have done nothing to really change it. Well, he gave me a look of total amazement and said, Abby, you have spent your entire professional career, so going on 25 years now, working to change educational opportunities for kids of color. You raise issues of race more than just about any white person I know. How can you say you've done nothing? So, I got a pretty smart husband and a pretty smart, supportive husband. I heard his point. But the difference is that while I have considered race as a key factor in the conditions that have created inequities in education, and I've certainly viewed racial equity as an important outcome of the work that we're doing in education, it's only recently that I've begun to view it as the other way around. So the fight for excellence and equity in education is dependent on the much more fundamental fight for racial justice. I've come to understand that unless we actively work to dismantle the structures and systems that perpetuate racial injustice, not work within them to improve outcomes, but dismantle them and rebuild in fundamentally different ways, that we're not going to get there. And that work must take place in both the personal and the professional realms. So what will it take to reach one day? It will take white people, publicly and privately, recognizing, and here I'm stealing a phrase from Michelle Molitor, who many of you may know, recognizing that our country was founded on the genocide of one people and built on the enslavement of another. We're talking 250 years of legalized slavery that built our country. And that regardless of when your white ancestors came to this country, regardless of whether they had a thing to do with the genocide of the people native to this land or the enslavement of Africans, that we still benefit from that history. Now, this is a pretty intense topic. I'm going to attempt to inject a little bit of humor into things here. Hold on. You see, I can't even do it. Are my slides here? Oh, there we are. Oh, that was a slide. Oh, is this one supposed to press? Help me out here. All right, there we go. Because I've been so funny so far, right? All right. Excellent, thank you. So, can people read that one in the back there? It will take white people becoming enraged by today's versions of systematic exclusion of people of color from our political systems. Because of our unique in the world system of mass incarceration and its overwhelming racial disproportionality, and our repressive voting laws, almost 2 million African Americans of voting age are disenfranchised. That's a rate that's 4 times the rate of non-African Americans. And in some states, that means that more than 1 in 5 African Americans of voting age are barred from voting. So we can work hard to teach our students to read, to think critically, and we should. But if we are not expressly working to dismantle the systems that lead to those statistics, we are fighting a losing battle. It will take white parents teaching our white children not just that they should help other people less fortunate, though that is certainly nice, but that their good fortune, our good fortune as white people, is anything but fortuitous. Instead, it has been carefully designed over centuries at the explicit expense of people of color. It will take white parents recognizing that to teach our white children to be colorblind is to fail to equip them to be effective anti-racists. Yes, parents of color should be teaching their kids these same things, but let's face it, it's a harder sell for white folks. And we bear a different level of responsibility. It will take all of us constantly and critically examining our beliefs, our language, our behaviors as educators, as parents, and as leaders in this work. As educators, are we acting in ways that buy into the notion that some people deserve less, are destined to achieve less? Despite our best intentions to improve life outcomes for kids of color, are we assuming that the system won't change and preparing our students just to operate within that system? Or are we owning our part in that system and doing our part of the work to change it and urging our kids to do the same? As parents, are we practicing what we preach? Are we buying into the notion that the way for our kids to succeed in life is to put them in elite environments, which implicitly teach them that white people are meant to be leaders and winners, and people of color, by and large, are not? Or are we putting our kids in schools that reflect the makeup of our communities and resisting that fear that we are sacrificing our kids for a cause? Are we perpetuating the fiction that hard work is the sole differentiator of success, pointing to the people of color who have achieved that success as evidence? Or are we pulling back the curtain with our kids and acknowledging that even though the president is black, the system is still fundamentally rigged? And it will take white folks doing all of this anti-racism work in ways that are accountable to and in partnership with people of color, recognizing that people of color should be the central leaders in this movement for racial justice and for educational equity. Which means, as my friend Richard Niancori recently put it to me, considering what it looks like to yield power, privilege, and influence in our various organizations to people who have not historically had it. Not just distribute, but yield. In an article on the topic of white debt that was recently in the New York Times Magazine, Eula Bliss put it this way to her white son: "You might be stuck on this team, but you don't have to play by its rules." This isn't about white shame or guilt, though it is hard not to feel those emotions. This is about the internal power that we all have to understand the lie of race, to question our own role in that system. And while our privilege is unearned and at times uncomfortable, it's something that we have to be prepared to use when it's in service of changing that very power structure. Can't go without Star Wars. So what will it take to reach one day? It will take white folks digging deep. Because the fight for educational equity and excellence, that fight for one day that we all signed up for 25 or 15 or 10 years ago or just last summer, that fight must at its core be a fight for racial justice. At a closing ceremony of a Teach for America Institute in the early 90s, I'm not sure which one because I think I was at every institute from 92 to 2000, I first heard Ella's song, which is a song about the great civil rights leader Ella Baker, written and performed by Sweet Honey in the Rock. And I'm going to close with the first couple of lines of that song. And I decided I was going to make a game time decision here, but in the spirit of digging deep, I'm going to sing them. And I invite all those of you who know it to join me. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. Now I introduce Ana Ponce.
Thank you, Abigail, for leaving us with that. Buenos dias. Okay, who's from LA here? All right, so we're representing here. My name is Ana Ponce, and I'm going to provide you a personal perspective from a social cultural lens in terms of how I visualize that one day in my lifetime. And I start with a story of Javier. Last summer, Javier dropped into my office after finishing his freshman year, and it was a busy day. He just dropped in unannounced, and I was excited to see him, and I took a few minutes to make sure that I heard about his first year. And he came in with Brenda. They've been friends through high school, and I'd gotten to know both of them. So, we went through the small talk and this and that, and then Javier got to the point of the visit. He had a purpose that day. He came with a manila folder, and inside that manila folder was a 5-page reflection essay. And he said, I have some feedback to you on how to make Camino Nuevo for the rest of the kids. And he had a very clear objective that was personal to him. He has 3 younger sisters at Camino Nuevo, and he wanted me to learn from his experience so I could make it better for his sisters and for the rest of the kids. So I was just so proud that he had taken the time to share his experience, to bring out his voice and his truth in that reflection essay, because it didn't come from me. He didn't show up to a focus group. He didn't complete a survey like we often send. That's how typically we get student feedback. He actually thought about his freshman year and how we had and had not prepared him for success. And he had some suggestions, let me tell you. Some of the suggestions were pretty harsh, and we owned them. But what was interesting about his essay was how he interwove, am I messing? Okay, no. How he interwove those other unintended consequences of poverty into his preparation or lack of preparation. And basically what he wanted us to do at Camino Nuevo was to do more, to step in the gap for some of those challenges that he and many children like him were facing in his education. And when I think about one day, that's what I go back to. It's not just about the education that we provide to our students and the rigor and the academic program and the accountability pieces that we have in place for us as adults. It's also about looking at how we see them as human beings. And I believe that it is my responsibility as an educator, as a community member, to always be intentional about protecting that light, that voice of every child that I can. It starts with the people in my family, it starts with my child, but it's also all of those children that are part of my organization and all of those children that are part of our society and in our country. And it's not just about preparing them academically. If they don't believe in themselves, if that light doesn't shine through, if we don't protect their voice, that one day is not going to come for them or for us. I believe that regardless of their environmental context, all children deserve to develop a positive sense of identity and belonging. This responsibility embraces a holistic approach to education. For one day to come, for me, the system must address systemic and structural inequalities that contribute to the undereducation of poor, Black, and brown children. We must work relentlessly to have good schools. Absolutely, that academic preparation is the foundation to build on, but also that our kids have access to health care, that they live in safe neighborhoods, that their parents make a living wage, and that they have safe water to drink. As educators, it is our shared responsibility to advocate for our children across the education adjacent challenges that impact their outcomes. That one day is the day that our nation moves beyond the token success of a few to provide universal access for all. I have traveled the road of tokenism as a poor immigrant English language learner making her way to a position of influence. I have lived in the deafening silence of marginalization and had to search for my voice and sense of self, because through many experiences, I was stripped of that. The journey looks something like this. In elementary school, I was silenced because I was an English language learner. In high school, I was silenced because I thought a four-year college was an option for me. And in college, I was silenced because I had an accent. In my career, I have been silenced because I think differently and because I have a different personal history. My journey to access remains complicated to this day. Yet I stay the course because I am the immigrant child, I am the English language learner, and I am the poor brown student who is trying really hard to stay in the game. To reach my one day requires a two-pronged approach, which must celebrate the successes of our high performers while deeply investing in supporting the average kids. Javier was an average kid at Camino Nuevo. We must make a more concerted effort to stand in the gap for the average underserved student to make sure they stay in school, that they succeed in college, and that they have access to a career that ends the cycle of poverty. We must bridge the tragic gap that often separates us as adults, forcing us to take sides and potentially hurting our children. So what will it take to reach one day? in my opinion? 3 things: collective action, working in community, and fostering student agency. Collective action, where we focus on harvesting our shared interests for the best interests of students, where we work through the struggle of taking sides and really look for our shared interests to build on, where we collaborate across social services, actually create a system that allows for case management of vulnerable situations, where we have an honest conversation of what it will take for all students to have access and be ready to compete, where we sit in the discomfort of what is and what could be for us as individuals and for us as leaders in the educational landscape. To work in community. 2, that's the second one. To borrow from Parker Palmer's words, it is only in community that we're going to have a chance to check and correct our own self-perceptions. When in community, we recognize that it's not our role to do for others, but with others. When we know who we are and what we bring from our different perspectives. When we're intentional about building relationships that are based on difference and not imposed values. When we value the voices of the very people we say we serve and giving them a place at the table. 3, student agency, where students develop a strong sense of purpose and understand their why, not our why, their why, and that we're intentional about that. Where we support a positive narrative of family context and don't make assumptions or judgments. Where students acquire tools to hold us accountable, like Javier came back and held me and Camino Nuevo accountable. Where we empower our students and not control them. Where we push our students to find their voice, to practice their voice, and to hear their voice, even when it makes us uncomfortable. And we have to constantly be asking, are we doing right by our kids and not just right by our values and what we believe is right from our perspective? We can tend to the light and voice of every child as we educate them. It's our responsibility to give them the voice and to support them in speaking their truth. My one day in my lifetime is Javier. Hundreds of thousands of Javiers, Jackies, Xaviers, who are not silenced and whose light shines and voices are heard. Javiers who will call us out on what we're doing right, but most importantly, on what we're not doing right. Javiers that will hold me, you, and the system accountable. Students that will demand that we protect the light and the voice of the generations behind them. We have to give them their power back. We can do this if we engage in collective action, if we work in community, and intentionally foster student voices. I live and work in hope of my one day because I believe in us and I believe in them. Thank you. Now, Jonathan Klein.
Hey, y'all. I'm so grateful to be with you today and for the opportunity to share a little bit about myself and the work I've had the privilege to be a part of since I joined the Corps in 1997. I really think this summit is a great opportunity for each of us to reflect on our identities and the impact we hope to make, and to recommit to each other and our communities back home. 20 years in, I am still white and male and privileged. And like all of us, I am deeply, deeply impacted by the racist constructs of our American culture. And as a result of many conversations, missteps, study, and reflection, I recommit every day to being an ally, an anti-racist, to understand what I mean by that, and to be a learner. And over the years, I've come to deeply honor the incredible leap of faith that African American moms and dads and other families and parents of color make every day sending their babies to our public schools. Given our collective results and failure to consistently provide them love, safety, and the expectation of success. About 8 years ago, I helped create Go Public Schools in Oakland, California, and set out to build a broad coalition of families, educators, and civic leaders focused on students and education justice. We've had major successes and heartbreaking failures, and we've learned from both. Today, I'd like to offer 3 reflections for those of you that are headed back to your communities to continue this work. 1, that election matters. 2, healthy unions matter. And 3, that parent leadership and voice is essential for education change. So first, we should have gotten involved in politics much earlier. Elections truly matter. I've been in Oakland since 1999, and the first time we organized around school board elections was in 2012, 13 years in. Over the last 2 election cycles, our network's candidates for school board have won in 5 of 6 races on a 7-person board. Over the last 2 election cycles, we've helped pass 2 measures that have brought over $650 million of new resources to Oakland Public Schools. And we're one of Oakland Mayor Libby Schaaf's chief policy partners around education. And a more competent school board and elected leadership is making such a difference in our city. Just last week, our mayor, our superintendent, our school board came together with college presidents from all over the country to launch the Oakland Promise. With a first $25 million committed to college savings accounts and scholarships. It's aimed at raising our collective expectations of our youth and tripling the number of Oakland kids that graduate from college over the next 10 years. But across our movement, we have a long way to go politically. So think for a moment about your professional colleagues. Take a guess about what percentage of them voted in the last election related to education. Do you have a number in mind? Now wrap your mind around this. A recent analysis of 5 education reform organizations in the Los Angeles area, 3 large CMOs and 2 teacher advocacy groups, found that just 24% of their members, employees, are registered to vote. The same study found that just 3% of those organizations' members actually voted in a school board election that had a clear education reform-aligned candidate. This is an election year and not just in November. It has been difficult in Oakland to mobilize busy educators to prioritize elections work during the fall of the back-to-school season. But 1 in 4 of us registered and 3 out of 100 of us voting, that's not acceptable. We can and must do better. So please get involved and vote. My second reflection is that I regret over these many years not being more steadfast and outspoken and unapologetic about the importance of healthy unions and about how we need our best educators to get involved and lead them. Jessica Stewart, she's Bay Area 2005 on my team at GO, is an Alameda County teacher, former Alameda County Teacher of the Year. She's a marvelous organizer. I'm haunted by Jessica's reflection that no one asked her to consider setting her sights on becoming the union president. She's a rock star. How different would that Oakland Promise launch have been last week if she, as a teacher in her 11th year in the classroom, was serving as president of the Teachers Union? Instead, Oakland's current union president skipped the event, just hours after leading a Charter Schools Are Not Public Schools rally at our school board meeting the night before. So another example of the importance of healthy unions came in 2010, when our city had the opportunity to pass a parcel tax to raise $200 million to retain and develop effective teachers. Our local teachers union didn't support the campaign because the money would have benefited teachers in both district-run and charter schools. Ultimately, 65.95% of Oakland voters supported the new tax, but we lost. We needed 66.67%, a 2/3 majority to win. We lost by just 760 votes out of more than 106,000 cast. I think that is fewer votes than there are people in this room today. Because of this missed opportunity, every teacher who was teaching then and every teacher who is teaching now in Oakland lost tens of thousands of dollars in increased compensation. Compensation that our teachers have more than earned and very much deserve. 3,000 teachers lost about a $5,000 per year raise over the ideological objections of a handful of union leaders. Healthy, democratic unions matter. If families and frankly rank and file teachers were more organized, more active, that just couldn't happen. Which leads me to my third reflection. Parent leadership is essential. No matter how strong your grasstops, networks, and coalitions, there's no substitute for the voices of parents demanding excellence for their children. In almost every major change or battle, organized parent leaders, as we've been pushing for excellence and equity, made the difference. A couple weeks ago, Sarah Carpenter, she's a parent leader in Memphis, came to meet with some of our Oakland parents. She shared a reflection from a recent conference of education policymakers and philanthropists and educators. And she said something like all those PhDs and master's degrees, and they don't know how to get it done for students. They don't know how change happens parent to parent in a community. Our movement strategy, and some of the other speakers I think have talked about this, needs to better account for relational and cultural change, block by block, family to family, neighbor to neighbor, not just the technical work of improving education policy. We have to find a way to be both bold and thoughtful, and to develop our strategies deeply rooted in relationship and community. People in relationship make change together in places. So in this terrible moment of toxic, polarized, often openly racist American politics, I challenge each of us to return to our communities, convene diverse groups, and work together to articulate shared vision, values, and rationale, that why that Anna alluded to. Like, who are the young people, who are the future adults that we are nurturing our young people to become in our communities? The relationships built through those conversations, understanding strengthened, and North Stars defined will propel us faster toward one day. You know, this weekend I have been missing, I'm here with my family, and I'm missing our friend Steve Sexton, Los Angeles 95, who's a former lead of the Summer Institute curriculum and the co-founder of the Lighthouse Community Charter School. Steve passed away this year from cancer, leaving an incredible family and just a wonderful school community. And I keep picturing his final walk through the halls of Lighthouse, considering his legacy and his community of scholars. He wanted to see it one last time, what he knew would be his final walk. And I'm also reminded of author Jonathan Kozol's keynote address to us at the 10th anniversary summit, which was the first alumni summit I had the opportunity to attend. And that night it was a hot and humid. It was in New York in the summer, and Jonathan Kozol, he pulled off his jacket over the course of his remarks. He rolled up his sleeves. Sweat was dripping down, like his whole shirt was soaked. And I remember his whole body leaned over the podium and his arms doing this, like reaching out to us. Again and again, it was like a reflection of his commitment and his exhortation to us to carry on the dream. I honor Steve and all of you and the students and families we serve. And I will never forget Kozol's final words to us that night, and so they're mine too. Life goes fast, use it well.
Ta-Nehisi Coates' recent book, Between the World and Me, tries to educate his son on the brutal history of race relations in the United States and the harsh realities of what it means to come of age of a black man in America. Coates, he pulls no punches, he covers it all. From the realities in of slavery in the pre-Civil War era, to the Jim Crow South, to systematic racism, mass incarceration, and police brutality that plagues our country today. Brutality that plagues our country today. August 26, 2012 in Sanford, Florida, 17-year-old Trayvon Martin, walking candy in his pocket, is shot dead for being suspicious or for looking black. August 9th, 2014 in Ferguson, Missouri, 18-year-old Michael Brown, walking in his neighborhood, is shot 12 times for looking black. November 22nd, 2014, 12-year-old Tamir Rice playing with a toy gun in a park. Police arrive, and within 2 seconds, 2 shots fired, and 12-year-old Tamir Rice dead because he's a threat or for being black. The theme of this summit is one day, and when I think of one day, the phrase and what it means to me, I think of the events that I just described, and as Joel Klein said, I think of the current state of education in America today. By age 5, low-income students have been exposed to 20 million words, whereas high-income students have been exposed to 50 million words. By the end of 4th grade, African American, Hispanic, and low-income students are already 2 grade levels behind. The dropout rate for low-income students is 7 times higher than that of high-income students. Half of all high-income families by the age of 25 have earned a bachelor's degree. In low-income families, it's 1 out of 10. These stats are alarming. The bodies and minds of the students who we teach and serve every day are at risk. The tragic consequences of our broken systems demands that we take action. This action cannot happen in a single day or a single effort. One day will not be achieved by one strategy, one approach, one classroom, one organization, or in one part of this country. It will take more than that. It will take a variety of innovations, a variety of teaching methods, and a variety of school designs. It will take teachers and leaders and people inside and outside of education who are fed up with the current state of education in this country. That's what it will take. It will take creativity, but creativity alone will not be enough. So then you ask, what will it take to reach one day? I believe there's 5 key pillars that must be present to drive this work, and these are the ones that I live by. Love, sacrifice, boldness, persistence, and urgency. Pillar 1 is love. Every single time I interact with a child, I look directly into their eyes. And I always see 2 things in every child, no matter where they came from, where they're going. I see beauty and I see intellect. Every child has these. When you see a child, love must come first. You know the kind of love I'm talking about, the kind of love that causes you to praise them when they do well and push them to reach their full potential. The kind of love that has guided your hand late in the night when you're upgrading papers with blurry eyes and too little sleep. The kind of love that whispers in your ear they can when everybody else says they can't. You are sitting in this room today because you know that kind of love. Pillar 2 is sacrifice. When you truly have love, the love that I just talked about, self-sacrifice becomes natural. It becomes a part of who you are. You are no longer a part of the mission. The mission is now part of you. A question that I often get is, Julie, how do you sustain and balance the work for 25 years? I only recently came to realize why I pause when I hear that question. I pause because I don't see the work in terms of balancing my times and the mission time. The mission is who I am. The mission is who I am. Some of the greatest leaders in our country have sacrificed their time for the betterment of others. And that is what it will take, sacrificing your time for the betterment of others. I want my own children, Amari and Nyla, to see me sacrifice in hopes that one day, too, they can find their work that becomes their mission and they sacrifice for the betterment of others. Pillar 3, boldness. Marva Collins, bold. Jaime Escalante, bold. Wendy Kopp, bold. Marva Collins was a substitute teacher in Chicago Public Schools for 14 years. 14 years she substitute taught. She got fed up. Instead of talking about it, after 14 years, she got the courage to do something about it. She emptied her savings of $5,000 and founded Westside Preparatory High School in 1975 to service the kids that Chicago Public Schools had either failed or mislabeled as a learning disability. Her school remained open for 30 years. Jaime Escalante, a high school teacher in East LA, he was given a group of students who haven't achieved for quite some time. His assignment was to teach a low-level math course. He refused to do so, of course, and he taught his students AP Calculus. After some time, he was able to close the gap, but as we all sit in this room, we know closing the gap is not good enough. So then he charged his students to reach their full potential. That year, 18 of his students passed the AP Calculus exam, and then the Education Testing Service came a-knocking. They said, "We're suspicious. Your students used strategies that were too similar." Wendy Kopp, a 22-year-old college student, not an educational expert, became fed up with the injustices that existed in education. So she decided to have the courage to do something about it. But she proposed a new way. She tapped into college graduate students. She believed that she put you in the classroom, that you had the ability to change the trajectory for every single child you taught. Her idea came into action, and Teach for America was launched in 1990. But she didn't stop there. She decided to scale up her idea. As she looked globally, she saw there was still an education gap, and she launched Teach for All in 2007. Marva Collins, Jaime Escalante, and Wendy Kopp are bold leaders who had the courage to stand up in face of critics. Pillar 4 that I would like to talk about now is persistence, that I heard mentioned over and over again. I remember my first year assignment. I was an 8th grade ELA teacher, and I was teaching writing. So I wanted my students to be able to write 5-paragraph essays that had rich vocabulary and that were on topic. My mentor, veteran teacher, said, "Julie, I like your energy, but the students cannot write." So this year, we were only focusing on sentences. Sentences, she was wrong. Every single night, I wrote 3 different lesson plans in order to ensure that I first could close the gap, but then closing the gap is not good enough, so my students could reach their full potential. By December, 70% of my students were writing 5-paragraph essays that had rich vocabulary, and they were on topic. But by June, the other 30% of the students had achieved the goal. People would come observe, and they would say, "Julie, what is the trick?" I said, "No trick, hard work for teacher and student alike." Pillar 5 is urgency. Dr. King said it will be fatal of the nation to overlook the urgency of the moment. It'd be fatal of the nation to overlook the urgency of the moment. There are critics out there, and there are a lot of barriers. We cannot wait for the politicians. We cannot wait for policy changes, and we definitely cannot wait for poverty to be eradicated. We must utilize every minute of every day to ensure that our students are getting instruction that is rigorous, that is relevant, that is challenging, and that is engaging, and that prepares them for tomorrow, because that is the true assignment, my friends, is to prepare them for tomorrow. We must act with urgency. So we're not just sitting at a conference all week. This is a call to action. It's a call to what? And there are 5 pillars that you must make part of your being and you must use to drive this work. Number 1, love your children. Number 2, sacrifice for the betterment of others. Number 3 is act with boldness and put children first. And number 4 is persistence, always achieve above the bar. And number 5 is our students cannot and should not wait. Please stand, everybody in the room. And I want you to look directly into somebody's eyes. You have to look directly into somebody's eyes. And repeat after me. One day. It is today. It's you. It's me. It's all the people in this room working shoulder to shoulder. If my mind can conceive it, come on guys, this is a movement here. If my mind can conceive it, and my heart can believe it, I know we can achieve it. So that is what the call of action is about today. I thank all of you in this room for inspiring me to continue this work. I thank my husband, Dana, who was also a core member, because without him, I can't give all this time. I thank my son, Amari. I thank my daughter, Nyla, for making this possible. And for Uncommon Schools, I see you in the house today. And for Uncommon Schools, this work is incredibly hard. I thank you for all you do. And I definitely would not want to be on this journey with anybody else rather than you. One day, it's today, my friends. Thank you.
It's beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you.
And Julie, we all thank you. We ended on the perfect note. 6 amazing people sharing their stories. But if we don't translate those stories to action, and we don't remember those children who are counting on us to change their world, then this will not have been a great event. So please, this is a time, as these 6 people said to you, to look inward, to think about your world, your life, and the world you want to create. It is going to take a whole lot more than a conference to change a country that dramatically needs change. And those kids we saw in pictures and you saw in your classrooms are counting on us. Thank you and have a wonderful evening.